If you tuned in last week, you saw we did get some preliminary numbers from Craig Jones, 1.8 million one night, and then the next night, 1.32, for an overall total of about 3.14 million viewers. And we said last week that is a huge success for the sport. I also made a claim that said, hey, if anybody wants to throw the real numbers at me, I'd be happy to go ahead and insert them into the same calculations and do a little bit more research. And wouldn't you know it, somebody slid into my DMs that week. And yes, it would be Craig Jones, who was taking time out of whatever beef he felt like instigating with Gordon that day. I felt like it was important to give you guys some updates on some of our initial findings. As a reminder, we said it last week and it bears some repeating here. These are somewhat apples to oranges. This is not quite the same as what a rating from Nielsen is. However, we are doing our best to continue a conversation that hopefully gives you a better idea as to where we stand as a community and the growing reach of our sport. So we thought that we would present the old findings first. So last week, when we put together this chart, you may notice that we had positioned the Craig Jones Invitational with its 1.8 million viewers at around the 6th spot for Friday night's telecast. With the updated numbers, we were able to then find out that, yes, there was going to be some drop off. The updated numbers, it's tiny to see, but we will zoom in here. The Craig Jones Invitational is toward the bottom of that list. So for Friday night, according to millions viewed, the Craig Jones Invitational then drops to 42nd place. And yes, it did fall underneath Rampage and the PFL in terms of total viewership. Let's go to our next chart. The old CJI Saturday numbers we had put at 8th place for 1.33. The updated numbers, prepare for this, for a very, very, very tough Saturday programming. It's not even on this part of the chart. It's very, very tiny to see, but it'll show you right here. It's at the bottom of the second page of this. The Craig Jones Invitational for millions viewed comes in at 81st place. So when Craig threw the numbers at me, I looked at a few things. We added in a few more variables. First, we looked at the unique viewers. That is the most specific way of saying individuals. That unique information then got plugged into another thing, which is that you would be surprised to find out that the Craig Jones Invitational did not even break 50% of its viewership from the United States. It had a huge appeal on the international eyeballs. So with that in mind, we were able to recalculate. We also added in news programs, and that will give you the update here. This might seem like it's bad news because we were so excited about it. Did we pop the champagne too early? Did we overstate what these numbers were last week? You may recall, though, at the very end of my speech, I did say that the more interesting numbers to all of us here are going to be the 18 to 49 demographic. And in that, we have new findings. Let's start with our Friday numbers. That Friday, the Craig Jones Invitational, that is in the 18 to 49 demographic. A little bit earlier, we did get a note from our good friend, Egghead. He mentioned that yes, Tom Selleck, Magnum PI, yes. Tom Selleck Blue Bloods, no. Well, unfortunately, Tom Selleck Blue Bloods actually outdrew us by a hair. Being on CBS. Some of these findings are conservative numbers, so it is possible we beat him, but I'm willing to concede he has the better mustache, so we're going to give him that spot. Still, top programming in the demo. Based off our most recent findings, Craig Jones Invitational on night number 2 ended up being within the top 10. Yes, it did very, very well in the demo. But if you were to compare it to the other sports programming for the week, we're still in for some surprises. You're going to be happy to find out that the Craig Jones Invitational was able to make the top 40 for both days. Amidst every other sport, it still, for both days in the demo, was able to occupy 9th place for Saturday and 38th place for the Friday telecast. That demo rating of a 0.221, just underneath All Elite Wrestling for Dynamite, which is its signature program, which again will likely get about a $90 million to $100 million a year deal. In looking at these numbers, I was also able to take a guesstimation at how Flow Grappling did with their first round of ADCC. You may recall it hit approximately 232,000 viewers for that first day. If I were to apply the same rubrics, I'm estimating that Flow Grappling's first round on YouTube did approximately a 0.05 or a 0.06, which would be outside of the top 100 sports broadcasts. Not bad, but just to show you how impressive it is that the Craig Jones Invitational actually was in the top 10 for at least one of its days, and specific to note that it improved from day 1 to day 2, doubling the amount of unique viewers. It might be hard to understand this. Maybe when we go into what's called the sub-demos, we can expand upon it further. And I hope you guys take this journey with me. Well, you don't have a choice. I mean, you're just coming with me. We created a PDF. What we did is we looked at some of the demographics compared to networks. And if you look at day 1 of the Craig Jones Invitational, it would have ranked as a network if you were to just take the programming. Most network programming is about 3 hours. The Craig Jones Invitational was 9 hours that day. But if you take just an idea of how competitive it was within the top networks. It gets more impressive when you look at night number 2. Additionally, 96% of the Craig Jones Invitational numbers were within the 18 to 54 demographic. 93% in the 18 to 49. Arguably the one that people quote the most whenever they talk about primetime viewing. But the best one here, and the one of note, in the 18 to 34 demographic, take a look here at these charts. In the 18 to 34, they were competitive enough to be top 3 just as a broadcast network. Kind of unheard of. Additionally, on night number 2, they could have potentially ranked as number 1 on night 2 in the 18 to 34 demographic. And even in the 24 to 54 demographic, yes, it does look like they performed very well, especially on night 2. They were able to compete with some of your parents who accidentally leave on Fox News. I do want to kind of come to just a few things maybe for future consideration. This is going to be where I probably stop doing the analysis. Not because I don't love numbers, but because if you do further analysis, you have to then bring in average watch time. And that's a computation that's a little bit harder to do. I'd rather prefer that to go to a stats nerd. This is more to get that conversation going and show the strength of what it is. My friend over at NBC who used to do research put it this way. It's like, it is tricky to kind of compare YouTube and this Nielsen rating, but it is a good time to remind you guys that Nielsen ratings themselves are a projected sample. What does that mean? 40,000 individuals actually are used to create the larger way that they guess how Americans view. Now, apparently it's a very accurate statistic, but even though we're projecting, so does Nielsen. And more importantly, they have a lot more resources than we do. What we can tell you is, based on YouTube, where they are right now, we had real numbers, and those real numbers gauged interest at the very least. But why did I do this? Number 1, transparency. I got numbers. I wanted to show you the old numbers to the new numbers. I promised you that. And listen, I didn't think I would even have access to that information, but Craig willingly gave that information to us, and I think that's great. And although they are less than perfect, I would argue they tell us some very interesting information. And from that, we can make the following arguments. We have to stop acting like the little engine that couldn't. We are growing in a sport, and there is some evidence to show that we have a very strong 18 to 34 demographic, and we should be playing on that heavily. Not only are they strong, but the fact that we have those people in the demographic for the next 15 years at minimum means that we have a strong base. And if we learn how to cultivate and grow that base, I think very good things can happen. We had some people who were shooting down the fact that these numbers weren't that great. And I want to tell you this, any way you cut it, even if these numbers aren't exact and could be reduced if you do further study, it was either competitive or outperformed NASCAR, the PFL, soccer, golf, tennis, and top rank boxing, all of which have significant deals. We mentioned this earlier, but 96% of the audience being in the relevant demo of 18 to 54 is staggering. You do not see that anywhere. And that's how we were able to cut the difference between millions viewed to something that is advertiser friendly, and a staggering 56% in the 18 to 34 demographic. Arguably, especially in the male demographic, one of the most coveted prizes. Huge. It should also be noted that the interest doubling from night 1 to night 2 on unique viewers tells you that people were interested in seeing maybe those Gabby Garcia and Craig Jones super fights, the Fionn Davies, Mackenzie Dern super fight, or they were interested in the story of seeing what would happen when two people became $1 million winners. And the fact that this didn't even garner 50% of its total viewership in the United States tells you there is not only interest here, but that you can potentially sell those rights to an international market. This is also the first significant data that we've had about the sport at all. And the fact that Craig literally told us, yes, we should all be using this information to leverage what it is that we get for our next deals, I think is a great sign from him and the good folks over at CJI. Also, I'm doing this because this is a straight out challenge to other data nerds. I am a huge Nielsen ratings fan. I've been following them for years, but I don't even pretend like I'm the biggest stats nerd. I know that people probably can do this better than me. But what I'm telling you is, in the future, if you look at those hour-long minutes or the average consumption time, yes, the numbers will likely go down. But I think we had the right interest levels, and I argue that the people who are stats nerds are essential in helping us shape the television presentation. In my opinion, that 4-hour night 2 had higher unique viewership and bodes very well for a smaller product. I'd love to see maybe 2 nights at 4 or 5 hours. I think the more data that we find, the more we'll be able to dial in that television products. I thank Craig, I thank Seth, all the people who provided me this data and entrusted me with the ability to go in and communicate this with you guys. I understand it's a little bit boring at times, but I argue it's worth the conversation, especially if it gets athletes and individuals paid in the near future. One last thing, this data sheet that I put together, the little PDF, I'll make it available to my followers on Patreon. If you notice, there are some entries here that say talk show. During that week, more than half of them are talk shows, meaning the pre or post show elements. I'm just saying there is money left on the table if the Craig Jones Invitational doesn't have a pre or a post show. Now, full disclosure, we here had pitched ourselves as being a pre and a post show element. It wasn't in the cards this go round. We're still amicable to it, but I would tell you this. Why is it that every other sport on that list had a very strong performance from their pre and post show elements, and we have none? If you guys want one, you have my number. And clearly, I know numbers well. And I'm happy to go ahead and work with you guys as we would be here at the Bullpen. We were huge fans of it, and we were huge fans of seeing you guys support the event in such a massive way. The PGF is way ahead of the game with the Bullpen. Well, I mean, yes, we will be returning for season 7 of the PGF.
Yes.
So they will have a pre-show element.
Hell yeah. Let's go. And big ups to BMAC for doing that, because he's the first dude that saw, in that sense that it was valuable.